outside the 10. Carr tips it in and it's he spins into the end zone for the touchdown. Watching greatness on one end in LeBron. There's a dude with 35 in white getting it done defensively and then offense taking over the fight. Mama, there goes that man.
They have shared a brilliant championship battle, but the championship can only be won by one, and it's going Dutch in 2021. Max Verstappen, for the first time ever, is champion of the world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's edition of the Waterboy Experience. I am your host, Davis McLemore, the Waterboy himself, and this is the sickly edition of the Waterboy Experience, because I am sick and tired of this dog of a show. No, with all seriousness, I do apologize if my voice doesn't sound a little off this week, because I am battling a little bit of tonsillitis, but I will not let it beat me. I told Jason here, by hell or high water, we will get this show done. I don't care if you have to do it while I'm on chemo. Chemo's no joke. I don't want to make light of chemo. But we have a lot to talk about today. We have the NFL Preseason, the final week, and I have a few games for that, and we also have some F1 reviews. And do we have nondescript motorsports?
No, we do not.
No, we have no nondescript motorsports. So here to take care of all that is my good friend, and he's in good health as far as I can tell. His back might be hurting a little bit from... What is your back hurting from?
Well, I got injured in the line of duty. I thought I could fuck two girls at the same time. Turns out...
You're lying now. Well, I'm going to introduce him now. Here is the co-host of this show, the man, Jason Shaddix. Jason, how are you? And don't talk about your back.
I don't understand why you ask me questions and then finally introduce me. Like, you're doing this backwards. Are you Chris Jericho? Are you doing this on purpose?
I'm just doing this how I feel comfortable doing this. And right now, we have no script. We have a few notes, but right now, this is not a scripted show. I just feel like doing whatever I want to on this show. Do you have a problem with that?
No.
The producer?
My back has a problem, but that's because I basically injured my back.
Well, essentially, yes, but you are not carrying the weight of this show.
I carried the weight of this show for 15 weeks.
15? Now it's my turn to carry it. And look what you're doing to my throat.
You really want to say that, huh?
You know, now that I think about it, I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, should we start off with anything else? Is there anything you want to cover before we get into the NFL preseason?
Like I said, I don't have any nondescript motorsport news, any sports news. We have a lot to talk about in the world of Formula One now that we're finally back, and we got a lot of news. So take us through the NFL first.
Well, as always, I'm going to start with my favorite team, the Sin City Las Vegas Raiders, versus the New England Patriots. They played this week, and statistically speaking, it was a pretty even game. The Patriots ran the ball very well, but ultimately turnovers and sacks held them back. Raiders made big plays when they had to, and that allowed them to gain a 23-6 difference on the Patriots. Now, this week I'm going to do something a little bit different. For almost every game, I'm going to list a standout. I'm going to list who stood out in this game for me. My standout for this game is defensive end Tayshaun Bauer for the Las Vegas Raiders. He had 5 tackles and 2 sacks on the night, and he led the league this preseason in sacks with 4. And I firmly believe he should make the 53-man roster because there's a lot of talk about who's going to join it, who's not. And right now, Tayshaun Bauer is one of those guys that's on the bubble, but he shouldn't even be on the bubble. I could see him even being a starter if we wanted to, because this guy has something. I'm also going to say something very controversial here. I think he has a better upside than our former first-round pick, Clelin Ferrell. But maybe I'm taking away from Cleveland a little bit because he is good, he's athletic, and I like him. But I'm not talking bad about him. He hasn't really proved himself yet. And maybe you get another guy that can prove himself to push Cleveland to do better. I don't know. It's a very confusing time. But for Tayshaun Bauer, it would be a really good pickup to add depth and talent to this defensive line, this already very talented defensive line of the Las Vegas Raiders. And that's my thoughts for that game. 23-6, Las Vegas. Your thoughts?
I didn't watch the game.
Okay, well, you suck. So let's go on to the Rams versus the Bengals. The Super Bowl rematch had most of its drama in the joint practice. You might have seen the reports coming out that there were several different fights, several different isolated instances where these brawls broke out, and there was one big one where Aaron Donald was slinging this dude's helmet at him, ripped it off of him and started slinging it over his head. And I mean, it was wherever Kyle Rudolph is, he was probably having PTSD. I don't think he's on the Rams. So yeah, it was a very fun practice to watch, but it was very unsafe. And you can tell that there's a lot of tension still boiling over from the Super Bowl. So the Bengals won this game through a great passing game with 279 yards through the air and 5.9 yards per play. And the Rams ran the ball very well, but it just wasn't enough. I don't know if they really tried to their fullest. They didn't really play any of their starters in this game. The standout, I will say, is wide receiver Trenton Irwin for the Bengals. He had 9 receptions for 93 yards and averaged 10 yards per play. He was a big proponent of the success of that passing game in this game. So ultimately, it was the Bengals beating the Rams 16-7. Your thoughts?
Whose bloody idea was it to have the Rams and the Bengals practice?
Joint practice, yeah. I'm not really sure. They do this before every preseason game where the two teams will scrimmage and practice together, and that's where the starters really get most of their reps. I didn't mention this for the Raiders versus Patriots joint practice, but the Raiders, every single drill, every single scrimmage play, the Raiders were just all over the Patriots. And Devontae Adams was roasting some guys. So that's a really promising sight. But for the Rams and the Bengals, there was a lot more fighting than there was actually practicing. And it makes me a little excited to see these guys play because you know it's going to be a tough game. The Bengals really do hold big resentment over the Rams for the Super Bowl loss. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where this goes.
And off in the sideline, some Bengal was talking his mouth off against the Rams, and that's why the fight started, huh?
Probably. Or Eli Apple said something. I don't know. Or maybe dropped a pick or something. I don't know. Whatever he did.
He dropped the soap. That's what he did.
Hey. Buccaneers versus the Colts. If you would have told me that the Bucs didn't even try on this game, I would believe you. They were 1 for 11 on third down, and they had 7 punts. They punted 7 times, I mean. So there's not really much to say about this game. I don't even have a standout for this game because, I mean, it was almost like neither team really tried. On the bright side, Tom Brady did play a couple snaps, and, you know, he's Tom Brady. He did pretty good. I think he was like 6 for 8. I don't have his stats written down here off the top of my head, but the Colts quarterback that they played was Sam Ehlinger, and I mentioned this last week. I'm excited. I want to see Sam Ehlinger play more because he was a guy that I really liked in college, and I think he really has potential. I think he'd be a great backup behind Matt Ryan. It depends on how many more years Matt Ryan has left in him, and, you know, if you want him to be mentored by Matt, and then Matt retires, and then you just bring up Sam Ehlinger to be your starter, I think that's a good deal. Ultimately, it was Colts 27, Bucks 10, and that was basically it. Bears versus the Browns. I would have been perfectly fine if they just cut this game in half. Both teams.
I'd be perfectly fine if we didn't talk about the Browns again.
Well, Deshaun Watson didn't play. That's a plus.
We will not speak his name. He is he who must not be named.
We'll no longer talk about it. We mentioned it last week. We're not going to talk about him again. Here we are talking about him. We're not going to talk about him again until something dramatic or whatever happens. But anyway, yes, I would have been perfectly fine if this game was just cut in half because all of the scoring essentially happened in the first half. Both teams threw the ball very well. Joshua Dobbs and Jacoby Brissett for the Browns both looked good, and so did several of their receivers. A lot of them had racked up like 80 yards apiece, and that's a good way to spread the ball around. And if you're looking for a starter to replace Deshaun Watson in the weeks to come, I think either Joshua Dobbs or Jacoby Brissett could do the Browns good. My standout was the quarterback for the Bears, Justin Fields. He was 14 for 16 for 156 yards and 3 touchdowns all in the first half. He did phenomenal, and look out for him to be a star this season. Ultimately, it was 21-20 with the Bears beating the Browns, and I'll move on to the Eagles versus the Dolphins. This was a lopsided game if I've ever seen one. The Dolphins had 291 passing yards, 203 rushing yards, 27 first downs, and their yards per play was 7.8. They absolutely dominated the Eagles here. and the Eagles had 6 punts on the game. You're not going to win if you had 6 or 7 punts. Like I said earlier, with the Buccaneers, you're not going to win a game if you're punting that many times, if you're giving the ball away that many times. I didn't exactly have a standout for this game, but I do want to mention Tyreek Hill did get a few snaps in, and he had 2 receptions, and I think they were both for like 40-plus yards. So he is absolutely going to be a deep threat for this Dolphins offense. But ultimately, the final score was 48-10 Dolphins.
God, that's a fucking massacre if I've ever seen one.
That's what I'm saying. Even like you look at the stats, everything is just on the Dolphins side. It was something.
So I've heard that, I don't know if this was about him, but wasn't Patrick Mahomes complimenting Tyreek Hill?
I haven't seen anything about that. He might have been, but Tyreek Hill they asked him, like, why'd you want to go play for Tua Tagovailoa? And he said, because I want to play with the most accurate quarterback in the league. And one thing that got mentioned, I think I was watching The Herd with Colin Cowherd, and he mentioned that there are several former Chiefs players that are now they're now saying that Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback in the league, which is bullshit. He's not. But his theory is that they're saying that basically to put down Patrick Mahomes, because if they were still on the Chiefs, obviously they would say Patrick Mahomes. So I think there's heat between some guys and Patrick. I don't know if there's necessarily heat between Tyreek Hill and Mahomes, but he was kind of very prematurely let go from that team. He was let go so they could sign, the TikTok dancer. So I would be mad too if I was him. Fastest wide receiver in the league, and you want to take Juju Smith-Schuster over me, I'd be mad too, which is understandable.
I mean, Tua is really good, but he needs to be healthy.
Tua is good. He's, like you said, he needs to be healthy. He's not very consistent. But I think what he lacked for him to be consistent, you can kind of compare him to Derek Carr a little bit. He needs that top wide receiver downfield. And 3 things are always for certain: death, taxes, and Tyreek Hill's going to be open downfield. I'm just saying. So I think Tyreek is that one guy that he really needed to push him to be able to be more productive and more consistent. Same thing with Derek Carr with Devontae Adams. So, Lions versus the Steelers. Your team. I know, buddy. It's okay. It's okay. The Lions did show some flashes here, especially on defense. Aiden Hutchinson shined in and out. He was only there for a little bit. This was a penalty-ridden game with a total of 21 penalties apiece. Steelers threw a great 240 yards through the air, but the Lions rushed very well. It wasn't enough to keep Pittsburgh down, though, and they ultimately escaped with a 19-9 win. My standout for this game, and I can't believe I'm saying this, Mitchell Trubisky threw 15 for 19 for 160 yards and a touchdown. But don't understate the performance of Kenny Pickett. It's a tough competition for the starting quarterback job in the Steel City right now, and I'm really back and forth on who's going to make it. Because if I'm personally looking at it, I'm thinking Kenny Pickett should be your guy. I think you need to let him kind of struggle a little bit, if that makes sense. Because he is young, he's a rookie, and he has a lot of potential. But I think the best thing for him to do, put him in week 1 starter and let him play the whole game. No, he's not going to be perfect. No, he's not going to be the second coming of Tom Brady. But let him kind of struggle and find his footing for a little bit, because he does have guys there like Chase Claypool who can help him out a lot. So that's my thoughts on that. I don't think Mitchell Trubisky's bad. I'm not talking bad about him. But he's proven before he's not the best starting quarterback you can have. I think Kenny Pickett has more upside than Mitchell Trubisky. But that was about it. 19-9 Steelers overtake the Lions. Your thoughts?
Come on, boys. We got to do better than that. Now, I know it's preseason, but still, we got to keep that momentum up.
Well, and really only like the first drive the starters played, and then they just kind of they started playing all their backup. So this game would have been a lot closer if it was a regular season game. I can tell you that. So
the thing
don't get your hopes down just yet.
Well, the thing for me that I look at is, okay, yes, they might be our backups and not our starters, but that's still an issue because you want backups to be good enough to replace the starters in case they get injured. That's the big thing. If you got a backup who can't keep up with your starter, I'm sorry, but you're not going to do very well. So boys, we need to get, better. We need to train those boys better. We just got to get better. That's all I can say.
You're going to get better. Once you get into mid-season form, a lot of these guys that you're watching might not make the final 53-man roster. So they're probably not going to be there next week. So,
well, fair enough.
And that's okay.
Well, actually, I have some breaking news. I don't know if you've seen this. I don't think you have. But the New Orleans Saints trade DB Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to the Philadelphia Eagles.
That'll certainly add to Philly's defensive back pass defense team. That's all I've got to say to that. No, good trade. Good pickup for the Eagles. So
don't know what they traded for. Doesn't say so.
Yeah, I don't think the details are out now. It's still pretty early.
I'm guessing it's round picks.
Probably. All right. This is my least favorite part of the show, where I have to review a Kansas City Chiefs game. Packers versus the Chiefs. Green Bay made way too many mistakes with 3 sacks, and they allowed a interception. However, both teams sucked, absolutely sucked on third down.
In your unbiased opinion?
In my unbiased opinion, both teams together, they only converted 3 third downs apiece. That's like 3 out of 10 or 3 out of 11. And I mean, I know it's preseason. They're probably not really trying that hard, but still. My standout star for this game, I think the Chiefs should bench Patrick Mahomes and start Shane Buechele. He threw for 11 for 17 for 166 yards and 2 touchdowns. He looked pretty good in this game. And you know what? He did it without doing any no-look throws or any shit like that. Overall, the Chiefs did beat the Packers 17-10, and that's about all I've got to say about that game. And that's about all I've got to say about this final week of the NFL preseason. Is there anything else you would like to add, Jason?
Patrick needs to do those trick shots simply because his Fortnite-loving fan base loves it. They love him.
Fortnite Battle Pass. No, but that shows you the crowd that likes him. These 12-year-old kids that play Fortnite and watch Patrick Mahomes highlight reels. That's all he is. He's not good for anything other than highlight reels.
Isn't that the same thing that's going on in wrestling?
Yeah, you could say that.
Well, folks, he's all worked up now, so let's move on.
There was also a fan there that was right behind the coaches, and he looked just like Andy Reid. It was fucking hilarious.
Oh, that's interesting.
He had to eat a few 10-year-old kids to get to that size, but it's okay. It's okay. You pulled it off pretty good.
All right, moving on from his tangent about the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. Because if you get him started, you can't shut him up. It is now time to move on to the main event, the thing people most listen to, the Formula One Grand Prix review, a.k.a. the race at Spa-Francorchamps.
Yes, please, let's move on.
We'll start off first with some news. It's official. McLaren has announced that Daniel Ricciardo will no longer race with the team after this season ends. The announcement, of course, has been awaited almost since the beginning of the year. Daniel has repeatedly failed to live up to the team's expectations. Right now, McLaren sits 5th in the Constructors' Championship and only being 20 points behind Alpine. Lando Norris has been able to score 76 points so far and a podium in Imola, while Daniel has only scored 19 points and his best finish was 6 at his home race in Australia.
Let me ask you this really quick. Very quickly.
Okay, shoot.
Who could replace Daniel Ricciardo to be just as good of a driver, if not kind of close, as Daniel Ricciardo, at least to where both McLaren cars can get up to where Lando Norris is?
I'll tell you in a second.
Okay, sweet. Go ahead.
Regardless of if Daniel races for another team or moves on from Formula One, McLaren is set to pay him out a rumored amount of $17 million, the remainder of his contract. Now, whether Oscar Piastri will be able to race for McLaren is still up to debate, but what is certain is that the team is done with the Honey Badger. And keeping on with the topic of Oscar Piastri and McLaren, and I'll get to your question, his case has gone up to the Contract Recognition Board on Monday, August the 29th. The board will decide whether Piastri's contract with Alpine is valid or not. If it is, then he can be forced to race in Alpine or even borrowed out to another team. And a lot of teams are keeping an eye on this developing story, because it is being speculated that if McLaren gets Piastri, then Alpine might want to buy out Pierre Gasly's contract in order to have an all-French team. And this might be possible because Helmut Marko, who's in charge of Red Bull's drivers program, has been said to be in the talks of signing Mick Schumacher to AlphaTauri. This might be a way to gain further interest in Porsche because they will now have a German driver whose father is considered to be one of the greatest in the sport. Now, if you notice, there's still one more seat in AlphaTauri, Yuki Tsunoda. That's because it's heavily speculated that now that Honda is out, Marko wants a different driver in there, and it's also said that Marko has been in talks to IndyCar star Colton Herta, which this one might be more of a stretch because he is in contract with McLaren right now. And going back to your question, like I said, Oscar Piastri might be the driver that McLaren will replace Daniel Ricciardo with if the recognition board goes with Oscar. If they go with Alpine, Alpine will give them the option to buy out his contract, or like I said, he might race for Alpine until his contract expires, or he might race for another team if Alpine decides to borrow him out. Regardless, McLaren does have a few drivers up their sleeves because they've been hiring drivers like mad. And Colton Herta is one of the big stars who's right now is racing for Andretti Motorsports and IndyCar, and he might come to Formula One. Now, he doesn't have the super license, which is required to race in Formula One, but because of all his experience in IndyCar and his previous junior career, McLaren might appeal to the FIA to give him that super license because of his past experience in single kart racing. And they might do that. So if they don't get Oscar Piastri, they could go with Colton, but in the case that they do get Oscar, then maybe Alpine will get Pierre Gasly, who doesn't have a future in Red Bull. In 2019, he failed up to live up to Red Bull's expectations and keep up with Max. He was removed from the Red Bull seat halfway through the season, and he was put back down to AlphaTauri, and even Helmut Marko and Christian Horner have said they don't really see a future with him, especially because now Max has a championship-winning car, and Checo is the perfect teammate. So it's being touted that Mick is going to go to AlphaTauri because he might not stay with Haas, especially because it came out today that it's rumored that he's not going to re-sign with Ferrari's driver academy and he'll be all on his own. And I don't blame him after Ferrari's season, but Helmut Marko, like I said, he's interested in Colton, so Red Bull might want to borrow him or buy him out of his contract with McLaren, which could be a really good PR thing because they're like, hey, look, we let our drivers go if they want to go race for another team, unlike Alpine, who wants to force them to stay. Does that answer your question?
Yes. I want to ask you another question. In what universe, or is there a universe, where Mick Schumacher signs with McLaren?
Oh, that's an interesting one. See, I don't know if that's possible or not because they have a bunch of drivers who can race for McLaren. And then they have their eyes set on Oscar. So even if they lose, Alpine might say, well, you can have him, you just got to pay X amount of dollars.
Right. I was just thinking, like, you know, if you want to build the racing team of the future, you have two young guys in Lando Norris and Mick Schumacher. Lando Norris can help Mick Schumacher get much, much better. And you're talking about if they both are on the same level, we could be talking in 2-3 years, McLaren 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. Interchangeable which one it is, but between Mick and Lando.
The thing is, I don't have a lot of faith in McLaren. Their last race winner before Daniel Ricciardo was 10 years prior with Jenson Button. They haven't won a race in 10 years, and Daniel got a win last year, and Lando Norris was very close last year, but the thing is, like I said, I don't have a lot of faith in them. They are a team that, to me, it doesn't seem like they know what way to go with. And, you know, partly, I don't think it's all Daniel's fault. I think partly it's McLaren's refusal to adapt to Daniel. And
the upper management.
Yes. And them wanting him to adapt to Lando, which you can't do that. It's not possible. You know, that's why, you know, even though they adapt part of the car for Checo can't keep up with Max because Max is far superior driver. No disrespect to Checo. I love me Checo, but we all know
when it's raining, Checo's better.
So far, he's been. So far. But what do you think about Mick Schumacher not signing with Ferrari again and him possibly not having a seat with Haas? Do you think that it's warranted that he doesn't get a seat with Haas due to his performance, or do you think that he should get another chance?
Well, I think he's a guy, if he was on any other team, you should give him another chance. He has shown flashes this season of improvement and that he really can race. Now, his decision to not want to stay with Ferrari, can you blame the guy? Look at how Ferrari has managed Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. You know, box in, box out. No, stay out, box in. You know, all this different kind of fuckery going on. Do you really want to be around that?
Let me put you on the hardest tire that doesn't fucking work.
Exactly. Or put you out there and we'll be like, well, we actually don't know what kind of tires you're on right now. So it's one of those things like, I can understand him not wanting to stay with Ferrari because they'll probably fuck him around the same way. And it puts him in a picture where he looks bad. That's why you look at Charles Leclerc. I think Charles Leclerc is one of the best racers out there today. But he doesn't really get to show that to his full potential because he is always being jerked around and all this different kind of stuff. And I saw a clip last night, something about him. He wanted to go for the fastest lap, and they said, no, we're the fastest right now. Don't go for the fastest lap. And then he ended up losing or something like that. I don't know. I don't know what was the situation there because I don't know the rules and the intricacies of F1 completely. But, you know, once again, can you blame Mick for not wanting to stay with Ferrari?
No, not really. And we'll talk about that fastest lap because that is part of the review. But
that was this race?
Yeah, that was this race.
Okay.
Well, it was also another race. I think it was the French Grand Prix as well. But I think the one you were watching might have been the one from Belgium. But yeah, no, I agree with you. For me personally, the way I see Haas is they started really strong and Mick couldn't keep up. And a lot of people said, well, look at Kevin Magnussen and look at his performance. And there was a huge deficit. But in Britain, at the end of the race in Britain, he was fucking just going fucking great. And he was fighting Max Verstappen. Granted, Max had a damaged car, but it's still, Mick was fighting him tooth and nail. Mick didn't win that race. Well, didn't win that fight against Verstappen. And then in Austria, we saw Mick turn it up to 11. We saw, Michael, well, not to compare him to his dad, but we saw his dad in him in that moment. And he was
not 100% his dad, but we saw flashes.
Exactly. And the way I look at the car and the way I look at Haas is Kevin Magnussen has been outperforming Mick, but at that moment, Mick was actually outperforming him at some points. And now I'm looking at Haas, and every time I see Haas is, I was expecting Haas to be in the midfield, to be battling for top points. But every race, they go back and back and back. And it's not all Mick's fault. Some people want to say it's all Mick's fault and he failed to deliver and get some points. Yes, there are some parts where he should have gotten points and he crashed out. Some parts, it was bad decision-making on Haas's part, and some was just bad luck in Canada, for example. But I look at Haas, and I see a team that you will never get better. You will have a moment where you'll be like, oh, great, we're at the front, or yeah, we got P5, but you'll still go back, because think about it. Haas only has a small budget. Even with the budget cap, they say, oh, we're not worried about going over budget for the budget cap. Yeah, because your budget is probably smaller than the budget cap. I mean, think about it. They've only had one upgrade this entire season, one actual upgrade, and Mick got it this Belgium Grand Prix, and Kevin got it at the Hungarian Grand Prix. But still, only one upgrade, while Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari have been keeping up with the budget and still producing a car that's faster every race and that's challenging the other cars. Haas hasn't been doing that. Yes, they made a really fast car from the get-go, but they never upgraded it until it was already too late, in my eyes, for them to actually be competitive. And now I think they're right ahead of Aston Martin in third to bottom, so in 7th place. And I don't see them getting any better next year. They definitely don't have the budget for it. They can't do the upgrades. And yes,
even with Mick,
even with a different driver. I know Mick had a bit of an expensive crash. 2 of them, one in Jeddah and one in Miami. But still, I don't see Haas being a place that Mick can show his true talent. If he goes to Alpine or if he goes to AlphaTauri, I think he has a better shot at being a better driver and showing his true potential than he would staying at Haas. That's my opinion.
I think you're right. And I mean, I think what he needs right now is leadership. I think he needs someone to guide him, someone to help him. And if he wanted to join Red Bull Racing and go AlphaTauri, or maybe eventually one day we could be looking at him in Red Bull Racing, I think that is the perfect spot for him.
I think he's got the potential for it. And if he's paired up with Pierre Gasly, that's a good mentor because Pierre's been around the block a few times. He might have not been great when he got his big chance with Red Bull, but Pierre is good. We saw loads of moments throughout the 2020 season and part of the 2021 season where he was really good. Now, the thing that failed them is the car itself. The car is not competitive like it was in 2020 and 2021 because Pierre won his first Grand Prix in Italy in 2020, and he was doing fucking great. And, I was hoping AlphaTauri would be further up the ladder, but they've taken a step back because of the car. But I think given the chance with Pierre and then you have Mick, like I said, I think not only AlphaTauri would benefit, but definitely so would Mick. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the matter. Let's move on.
Now to the race, please. Or
no, I still got more news.
Oh, you still? Jeez, how much news do you have? I tell you, if news breaks, Jason returns it for a refund.
This is only Thursday news. We still got Friday news. All right, let's start with our big announcement. On Friday, Audi officially announced that they will be joining Formula One in 2026 as an engine manufacturer. This was quite the shock as it will compete against its sister team of Porsche, whose own announcement is still pending. Audi will begin the necessary upgrades to its facilities needed to build the F1 engines as well as the hiring of more personnel. Chairman Marcus Duesman, I think that's how you pronounce it, it's German, also stated that he expects Audi to be at the front of the grid within 3 years.
Wow.
Yes, very ambitious. Now, they won't be starting their own works team as they don't want to pay up the $200 million entry fee. Instead, they spoke about they have been in talks with many teams, including McLaren, Williams, and Aston Martin, but it's been heavily rumored for a while that they may go for Sauber, which leads to our next announcement. Alfa Romeo announced that they will no longer be the title sponsor for Sauber, who many suspect is due to Audi having a keen interest in purchasing up to 75% of the team's stake. If these rumors are true, this is the first time since 2009 that Sauber has had any substantial funding. Whether Audi chooses Sauber or another team, we don't know until the end of this year, as announced by their chairman. What do you think about that?
That is very interesting, and it is very ambitious for them to think that they can come in and be at the top in 3 years. I'm hopeful. I'm not saying they're not going to be able to. I'm hopeful that they can, because that would be cool.
But yeah, that was the news regarding that. And also, we thought it might be the last time that Spa-Francorchamps would be on the Formula One calendar. But at the beginning of the race, we were told that Spa will stay for next year. Now, let's get on with the race and the practice and qualifying. Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Esteban Ocon, Lando Norris, Zhou Guanyu, and Mick Schumacher. What do all these racing drivers have in common with this race?
They all wore their lucky underwear?
No, they wore their girlfriend's underwear.
What are you talking about? Zhou Guanyu doesn't have a girlfriend.
Well, we don't know that. But what these guys have in common is they're all getting penalties at the start of the race because they went over their allotted engine and gearbox limit.
All of them? Because those are all like the top guys.
Yes, all of them. And yeah, they just went over the limits. These engines are not that reliable this season, I'll tell you that much. This didn't stop Verstappen and Leclerc to go out and qualifying all the way up to Q3, where Max set the fastest time after only doing one lap and then leaving. Because of his penalties, his pole position was given to Carlos Sainz, who was 0.07 of a second off Max Verstappen after doing multiple laps.
Jeez.
Exactly, and it was even more of a bigger difference between Mercedes and Max because they told Hamilton asked, well, what's the difference? And they were like, well, the difference is 1.8 seconds.
Which, for non-Formula One viewers and stuff, 1.8 seconds doesn't seem like a lot of time, but in Formula One, as close as these races are, that's a lot.
Yes, that's like ridiculously, you should not be racing bad.
Wow.
Yeah, but this entire race, it was Red Bull. Like that Red Bull car, specifically Max, was just on fire. It was firing on all cylinders. It was just the best car on the grid.
Isn't this the Red Bull track?
No, that is in Austria.
Okay, my bad.
Yeah. This one is just a classic track. And one cool feature about this race, if you see it, is this track goes 100 meters up in the air because of elevation, and it goes down. So you get some really spectacular shots. And the weather can be unpredictable. Luckily, though, it didn't rain this year like last year.
People were checking the weather for this race, and it did look like there was a chance of rain. And when I saw that, I was like, oh no, not this again. You got everybody start at the back of the pack taking engine penalties, and then you got the rain. That would just, it would be a dog of a race.
It would. Now, let's go into the race itself, because I was just during qualifying. Before the start of the race, Yuki was removed from his spot of P13 and put into the pit lane for changing engines alongside his teammate Pierre Gasly. His car had to be taken to the garage for electrical repairs during the time his car was meant to be on the grid. This meant, due to the rules, that he was starting in the pit lane as well. This moved Max from P15 to P14 and Charles up to P15. So they're already halfway through the grid, almost halfway. As the cars lined up for the start of the race after the warm-up lap, Checo positioned his car to try to cut off Carlos Sainz. Unfortunately, this didn't work for Checo, as this gave the Mercedes the chance to overtake him before the first corner. Now, this is because he was turning to the right, and because you're not going in a straight line and you're moving, you lose speed, and he thought he could catch up to Carlos Sainz. Didn't happen. Mercedes overtook him. Alpine overtook him of Fernando Alonso. Now, moving on towards after the Kemmel Straight, Fernando Alonso has the inside line going into turn 8, and Hamilton is on the outside. Hamilton's rear right tire hits Alonso's front left, causing Hamilton's cars to jump into the air and slam down hard. Hamilton is forced to stop the car due to floor damage and possible water leakage. Alonso on the radio says, quote, "Yeah, what an idiot, closing the door from the outside. I mean, we had a mega start, but this guy only knows how to drive and start in first."
I mean, that is fucking dangerous.
It is. Hamilton, after reviewing the footage, accepts the blame and apologizes to the team, though he refuses to talk to Alonso because he called them an idiot. And if you look at this
is high school drama.
It is. But
please.
If you look at the footage, Hamilton thought that Alonso was going to give up, that he was going to take the corner and all that. Alonso wasn't going to give in. Alonso went all the way in, and he just kept his line. And Hamilton says he didn't see him, that he was in his blind spot, and he just hit him. And Hamilton didn't get a penalty. That's the one thing. Hamilton didn't get a penalty because the stewards deemed it a first lap incident, which, you know what? Fair enough. It was a first lap incident. And, Hamilton said, yeah, once I saw the footage, I realized it was my fault. I'm sorry. I apologize. Good enough of him. Still, it was a bit of a pussy move not to apologize to Alonso to his face because he called him an idiot. I mean, Hamilton...
That's just unprofessional.
Yeah. Has Hamilton ever not called somebody an idiot in his younger career or something like that? He's done it.
In a more roundabout way, he has. Because, I mean, how many times have we seen Lewis Hamilton going, oh, yeah, he's unprofessional, he shouldn't be racing, all that kind of stuff. How many times has he done that?
Oh, so many times. His favorite line is, man, that was some dangerous driving.
Well, man, that was some dangerous driving.
Sure was. Now, the drama for this didn't
I've seen better driving going to the bar and people thinking that they can drive after they've been to the bar.
That is true. Now, drama didn't stop there, because after the incident with Fernando Alonso and Hamilton, the rest of the cars were still coming in, and Sebastian Vettel was having a really great race, and him and Lance Stroll were actually up in the points, but Vettel was being a little bit cheeky, was pushing forward. You know Vettel, he's a 4-time world champion, and he pushed his teammate off the track and into the gravel, so Lance Stroll ended up going back a few places and couldn't recover. But, that's still, Vettel was in P5, and, you got to do what you got to do. Now, in lap 2, Nicholas Latifi goes wide on turn 8, hits the gravel. Again, this turn 8, damn it, it's such a fucking spinny place. It's a lot of accidents happen there. Goes wide out of turn 8, hits the gravel, spins out, and Bottas tries to move out the way, but is slightly clipped by Latifi. Due to moving out of the way, Bottas hits the grass and then spins himself and gets beached on the gravel. Full safety car comes out for Bottas. Poor Bottas, he can't fucking catch a break. And Latifi didn't get any damage, and he just had to pit and get new tires and a new front wing. Stewards deemed it just an accident, and it was. Latifi just spun out. He couldn't control it, although he shouldn't have been a full throttle while spinning through the gravel. Anyway, on lap 4, and you'll get a kick out of this. On lap 4, Leclerc is forced to pit because his front right tire is smoking. Turns out, after footage came out, it was a visor tear-off that got stuck on Leclerc's brake duct. Do you know what a visor tear-off is?
Okay, so I'm gonna guess that the visor is like the windshield on the front, and when it tears off, it falls off.
So the visor tear-off is essentially, you know how they're wearing their visors in their helmet.
Right, yeah.
So they have all these little plastically covers on top of the visor itself, where if they get a lot of rain or if they get a lot of dust, rocks, or something like that, you grab it and you tear it off. Usually there's like 12 of those plastic things, and there's a way you throw them off so it doesn't get stuck in your own wheels or something like that, or your engine, and it causes a problem. Well, it turns out Max did it right, but because Leclerc was too close, it got stuck in the wind, and then it flew into his brake duct, and that's why it was smoking, because it was literally burning up in there, and he had to pit, and Ferrari had to take it off and put in the tires.
God. Yeah. Have you ever heard of that happening before?
It happens very rarely. Just, it's not something that happens all the time, but it does happen. It's not the first time we've heard of it.
Interesting. That's something you don't really think about, though.
No, not really. This is the first time I actually thought about it, and I was like, well, goddamn, poor Charles. Can't catch a break. And he couldn't catch a break the rest of the race. All right, so safety car ends. Sainz locks up coming out of the bus corner chicane, letting Checo catch up. On lap 6, Alex Albon, who was having such a tremendous race, passes Daniel Ricciardo for 7th due to the Williams' superior straight line speed. One of the jokes going around in the Formula One Instagram and Reddit places was Williams finally started to get some porpoising, and they said, finally, the Williams is fast enough to get porpoising. So that's just a little funny thing. Let's see.
You want to be fast, you got to deal with fast problems.
That is true. Now, at this point, Max is moving up at least one position every lap, and nobody's fighting him as they know it's a fruitless effort.
So he's climbing now.
Yes, by lap 8, Max is in 3rd place and Charles is in 16th place. Sainz pits at the end of lap 11 due to high tire degradation, though it's only thermal, and comes out in 6th. Checo pits 3 laps later and comes out ahead of Leclerc, and though his tires aren't up to temperature, he holds off Leclerc, but it's a bit cheeky and risked the penalty. Yeah, kind of didn't leave him any space, and even the announcers were like, Checo, shouldn't have done that.
Come on, Checo. Well, no, I mean, you want to talk about, like, he didn't leave him any space, no. But there you go, once again, one of the best defenders in F1, Sergio Perez.
I agree. Worth every penny and more. All right, so at this point, Ferrari is changing their strategies to Leclerc over the radio like Davis changes condoms.
Every 2 weeks.
Every 30 seconds, more like it. Mr. One Pump Chump. Anyway, they're changing strategies. They're like, okay, plan A, all right, plan B, all right, plan C, all right, plan A, B, B4, all right, that's not working. And they were saying so much about it, and later on they were asking Charles, hey, do you want to go on the medium tires so you could get a faster lap time or something like that? You want to go on the hard tires, you might be able to last longer and all that. And the announcer is saying, he's driving. He doesn't have access to all the computer and data monitors you guys have. He doesn't know how well the tires are going because of the other drivers. You guys know. Why are you asking him? So Ferrari is still being Ferrari. No surprise there. On lap 16, Max pits and comes out of Checo, and it only takes him, who at this point was in 2nd, and it only takes him 2 laps to catch up to Carlos. Carlos didn't even fight him for P1. He knew it was a fruitless battle. As Charles is getting past due to his dying tires, like I said, Ferrari is asking him what tires he wants to use and start discussing strategy, which every team on the field is listening to them. So great job, Ferrari. Albon is fighting for his fucking life, trying to score points, and he actually managed to keep P10, so he scored 1 point, which isn't much, but hey, it's a Williams. He's doing a fucking great job. Anyway, on lap 42 of 44, Ferrari tells Charles to pit so he can go for the fastest lap. Charles is reluctant but complies. Now, Due to overheating, the pit sensor isn't working on his car, and Charles gets a penalty for speeding in the pit lane. Gets 5 seconds added and doesn't even get the fastest lap, and ends up coming P6 after the race behind Fernando because of the 5-second penalty. So he lost about a few points, maybe 2-4 points because of that. So great job, Ferrari. Max wins the race.
Great job, Ferrari.
Yeah, Max wins the race with Checo coming behind him, and Carlos Sainz takes P3, and that is the race review. Oh boy, that was a bit of a mouthful, don't you think?
It indeed was. Wow.
But what did you think?
Impressive performance from Max Verstappen. And I think he proved right there. I told you after the race results came out and you sent them to me, I was like, well, he's world champion. That just about seals it up.
Yeah, I agree. This is now Max Verstappen's championship year, second year in a row. And here's the interesting thing. Checo Perez, because he finished P2, so 1-2 finish for Red Bull, yay. Checo goes up in the World Championship standings, so he now finally passes Leclerc, with Leclerc being 186 points. Ah, shit, that scared the fuck out of me.
What? I don't even know what just happened. Was that like? It's not raining, is it?
I don't know. Maybe it is.
I don't know.
Oh, either way, we're inside.
If you hear more thunder and lightning and rain and all that stuff, we are sorry. We're in the middle of a thunderstorm.
Yes.
Apparently. But anyway, continue.
Anyway, Checo Perez is 191 points. Charles Leclerc is down to 186 points. You want to take a guess how many points ahead Max Verstappen is?
Is it ridiculous to say 80?
I think you might be right. Max Verstappen is up to 284 points, which is ridiculous because, you know, Leclerc and him have been having great battles, and we thought it might have been Leclerc's year. You know, we actually thought Leclerc might win the championship this year, but Ferrari, being Ferrari, fucked another driver up. This isn't the first driver. Kimi Räikkönen was fucked over his second year in Ferrari after winning the championship, who, by the way, there we go, there's the thunder. Who, by the way, last Ferrari driver, and that was in 2007, they fucked Fernando Alonso, and he even commented later after the race when they asked him, did you think it was weird Ferrari did that? Did you think, you know, you would catch up to Charles? And he's like, no, I don't think I was going to catch up to Charles, but, you know, Ferrari has some weird strategies. He was fucked over. Sebastian Vettel was fucked over. And now Charles Leclerc is getting fucked over. So, yay, Ferrari.
So, back to Mick. Do you really want Mick to be in the middle of all that?
No, I do not.
Yeah. So, you know, and wow. So I'm wondering if Sebastian Vettel, if he was thinking about staying with Ferrari, I'm wondering if the now retired Sebastian Vettel, as of next year, told him, don't do it. Do you know what I mean?
He probably did, if we're going to be honest. Because he probably told him, look, I know your dad has been, you know, synonymous with Ferrari, but
This is not the same team your dad raced for.
no, it's not. The people in charge, they don't know how to run a fucking team. Anyway, for the championship standings, Red Bull leads them 475 points to Ferrari's 357 points, who might be overtaken by Mercedes, who have been consistent, minus Lewis Hamilton's front. 316 points. They're only, 39 points? No, 39 points behind Ferrari. There you go.
And I did the math. Between Verstappen and Checo, there's 93 points between the two of them.
That's a lot of points.
It's nothing like last year where we were, you know, just 1 or 2 points between Verstappen and Hamilton. This is Verstappen's year right here.
Agree. Now, look at this. Haas, 34 points. And Williams with 4 points, but they're so happy to get those points. So good for Williams.
Yeah,
they did really
they're glad
great.
to just be on the board.
Exactly. Williams did really great. Sebastian Vettel did really great. And yeah, that was the Formula One Grand Prix review of Belgium. Now, before any more lightning interrupts us, do you have any other things to say?
I would like to say, just as we're reporting, the Las Vegas Raiders cut our offensive tackle, Alex Leatherwood, who was our number 17 overall pick in a couple years ago's draft. So, I liked Leatherwood. He was a good kid, but there were 3 constants: death, taxes, and Alex Leatherwood was going to get a false start some point in every game. So, I'm not upset to see him go, because he cost us a lot of yards in offsides. But I hope wherever he goes now, he'll be with a better offensive line coach, and he can get better, and he can prove that he is worth, that he's not a draft bust, that he's worth that 17th overall pick. So, yeah, that's really all I've got now.
Oh, and there was also the news about, what was it, the kicker for the Washington Commanders got fired?
Oh, yeah. No, it was the Bills. That fucking dickhead.
Wasn't he involved in a gang rape of a 17-year-old girl? Or am I thinking of a different guy? Someone in the NFL did that.
So, Matt Araiza is the former punter for the Buffalo Bills. And accusations came out about him gang raping a 17-year-old girl while he was in college. And as soon, almost just a couple days after these accusations came out, they did their own investigating, and they came to the conclusion, okay, this guy's out. We got to get him out, whether it's true or not. And so they released him. Well, a little bit after that, his parents released a statement saying there has been a war waged on our son, and the rule of law is innocent until proven guilty. So now his parents are supporting him, and, you know, I don't expect them to be like, oh, he's a fucking piece of shit. I should have stuck the coat hanger a little farther.
Hey, that's my line, Jack.
But you know, if this is true, and there's damning evidence that there is true, he's a fucking piece of shit. And he, you know, the Bills did the right thing in cutting him, and I'm glad that they just cut him and didn't, you know, jerk him around and everything. But the Bills released a tweet after this. I'm paraphrasing it now because I don't have the tweet in front of me, but they said, Matt Araiza, our punter, has been officially released. Our culture is more important to us than winning football games. And you tell me, but does that feel like a little jab at the Browns?
Of course they are, because the Bills know, you know, how to run a successful team, and the Bills...
There's a difference between a good football team and the Cleveland Browns.
Exactly. So, Cleveland, take notice. Davis, suck us off. I mean, sign us off.
Well, with that, the Waterboy experience is closed. Thank you for listening to this episode, and peace!
Ow! Fucker!
Second and goal just outside the 10. Hart tips it in and it's Waller. He spins into the end zone for the touchdown. Watching greatness on one end. In the Bronx, there's a dude with 35 in white getting it done defensively and then offense taking over